So if you pressed play on this video, I'm assuming that that means you have been cheated on. And let me begin by saying that I am so sorry that you are going through this. You don't deserve this. It's not fair. I also want you to know that I have been in your shoes. And I remember desperately wanting to know, what could I do to feel better? How could I make this endless pain go away? And everything that I tell you today is what has helped me heal from being cheated on. Now I have to warn you, I'm not necessarily going to tell you what you want to hear, but what I am going to do is tell you what you need to know if you really want to feel better. One of the first and probably most challenging parts of healing is letting go of the idea of a fix. I know I became so wedded to a certain outcome or an explanation, or especially an apology. And I thought that I needed one of those things. And once I had one of those things, that it would be like a switch, that then everything would be better. And there's a few problems with that mindset of a fix. One, so often it's something that's external. It's something that you can't control. And so you could end up waiting, for your entire life for this thing to happen. The other is that healing doesn't work that way. Even though it seems like one single event is causing you all of this pain, there's not going to be one single event or piece of information that is going to undo all of this pain. It's more of a process. Think of it more as a rough stone being thrown into a river, and the sharp edges are slowly worn away as it settles into the riverbed. It's more that than a single fix. Along similar lines, accept that the person that hurt you cannot be the person that heals you. And I know that that can be hard to hear. After all, they're the ones that made this mess, and we want them to clean it up. It doesn't feel fair. It's like they destroyed everything, and then they just get to walk away. But they're not going to be the ones that can put you back together. And in some ways, that's a good thing. After all, you depended upon them before, you trusted them before, and what did they do with that? Do you really want to put your well-being in their hands now? Probably not. Yes, they are the ones that hurt you, but ultimately healing has to come from within. Now that you know what has been going on, you actually have some power. Because before you knew, you had no choices. Now that you know, you do. Take the time and make the effort to recognize your agency. I know that right now you're feeling like a victim. You're feeling like all of these things were done to you and done to you without your knowledge or permission. And that's true. Yet now you know. At least you know enough information that you can now make decisions for what you want for your life. Take back that power. Take back that ownership of your truth. What happened to you is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. I like to equate it to somebody being injured in an accident. The accident, no fault of their own. But that doesn't mean that they don't have to commit to the weeks or months of physical therapy in order to let their body heal and regain functioning. This is the same. At some point, it doesn't matter who or what hurt you. What matters is, what are you going to do in order to get better? And it's so easy when we're hurt, especially by somebody that we love and that we trust, to turn all of our energy, all of our focus towards them. But when we do that, we're robbing ourselves, because we deserve that energy. Give yourself the gift of your attention. After all, whatever we nurture is what grows. So if you turn all of your focus onto them, then what hurts you is going to be all consuming. But if instead you put your energy into your healing, just imagine what can follow. After you've been cheated on, you have a very valid need for your pain, for your story to be heard. And it's so important to find a way to have that need met. Now, so often we try to have that need met by talking to the one, or at least trying to talk to the one that cheated on us. And sometimes that works. Sometimes they are receptive and you can feel validated in your pain. But so often that's not the case. You get excuses or you get silence. And so it's so important to find another way to let your voice out. It doesn't matter if it's a journal, if it's friends, or if it's a therapist. Just make sure that you don't feel silenced. Because acknowledging that pain is the first step in letting go of that. Be aware of the ways in which you are torturing yourself. For me, in the months between the discovery of my husband's infidelity and the divorce, I obsessively tracked him via his other wife's social media. And it felt purposeful. I told myself that I needed to know that information for the purposes of the divorce. But the reality, I didn't need to know any of those things. But there was a dopamine rush associated with it. There was like an itch before I would go to the computer. And then a slight twinge of excitement even, and relief at the moment that I discovered something. But then that wound had been reopened. And so that momentary rush was followed with hours of additional pain, additional suffering that I didn't need to have. So be careful with all of that. There is that energy that's associated with those obsessions and those compulsions that is so easy to get caught up into. And while you can't escape the pain of what they did, make sure that you're not needlessly piling on to that pain yourself. After we've been cheated on, we frequently have this intense drive to know all of the sundry details. And I think that's because for so long we knew nothing. And so now we feel like we need to know it all. It's a way that we can try to regain some sense of control over our lives. It's a way that we try to make sense of everything that happened, that we try to reconcile the life that we thought we had with what we now know. And we act as though this one detail, this one piece of information is going to be like a key in a lock. And all of a sudden, oh, I understand everything now. But you have to be careful with those details, because once you know something, you can never unknow it. And there's certain images and certain things that you just don't want in your head. And also be aware that we give those details so much more power than they really have. We think that they're going to provide us with understanding, or perhaps with some sort of security that this sort of thing won't happen again. But details, no matter how numerous they are, can't do that. No matter what they told you once they were caught, no matter what society tells you, you did not make them cheat. And this is perhaps even more important, there is nothing that you could have done that would have kept them from cheating. This was their choice. Now, you may recognize that there are some things that perhaps you did or didn't do in your relationship that in hindsight you would have done differently. That's good. That's called learning. But even if you messed stuff up, that does not give them the right to betray you. That was their choice and theirs alone. If they are blaming you, recognize that that is their way of trying to shirk their responsibility. If others are blaming you, recognize that that is because they want to believe that this can't happen to them if they just do or don't do certain things. And the hard reality is that there is no such thing as an affair-proof relationship. I'm sorry you had to find that out the hard way. It's also easy after you've been cheated on to engage in what is often called the pick-me dance, where you try to make yourself so desirable that they want you back or that they want you instead of the affair partner. And it makes sense. We hate the feeling of being rejected. We hate the feeling of being tossed aside for somebody else. And so we want to be that first one chosen. We want them to want us. I think every single person that has ever been cheated on has this fantasy of their unfaithful partner coming to them and saying, "That was the worst mistake I have ever made. You are the best. You are the love of my life. You are everything. This other person is trash and is worthless." And yet I bet, even for those of you that heard words similar to those, it probably still wasn't enough. And that's because if we feel like we are not enough, no external validation is ever going to be enough to silence that voice. So instead of doing that flashy dance, trying to get them to pick you, do the inner work, the hard work, the quiet work of choosing yourself. Because that is what will finally silence that voice that says that you're not enough. It's not just about the affair, is it? It's also the thousands of lies and manipulations and gaslighting that goes into play to cover their tracks. I know for me, that part was so much more difficult to recover from than the actual infidelity. Of all of these, gaslighting is the most difficult to overcome because it interferes with your ability to trust yourself. And one of the best pieces of advice I can give you to help recover from gaslighting is find tangible ways to disprove it. I like to call these reality anchors. One example that I can give is I had a mugshot of my husband. He was arrested for bigamy, and I kept that mugshot in my purse for the better part of a year. And every time that he would make ridiculous claims to the lawyers, or every time I would start to question if I was crazy and everything that had been happening, I would take that mugshot out of my purse and I would unfold it and just look at it. And it was that tangible reminder of, no, this is real. This is the reality of what is going on. I'm not crazy. I've just been made to feel crazy. So figure out what your reality anchors are, what keeps you grounded, what helps you remember your truth and your voice. And we all need those reminders that we're sane. We're just living through an insane situation. Now, you're going to need plenty of reminders that their actions do not determine your worth. This is a wonderful time to set goals for yourself, achievable goals, because right now that goal of healing, I know that one feels impossible. So pick something smaller. It can be anything. One of my personal favorite ones is to do something with a finish line, whether that be a race or a degree or even a course, doesn't matter. But give yourself those tangible goals to work towards, because that is the best way to begin to rebuild your confidence after they have torn it apart. Okay, this is going to be one of those hard ones. This is one that I know I would have reacted to defensively for quite a long time. But even still, I want to share it with you because once I was ready to hear this truth, it really did help me kind of release some of those last ties to him and to what was done. Be careful about assuming a position of righteous indignation. By all means, get angry. You have every right to rage. But be careful about assuming this position of moral superiority, even though I know it's so easy to do when they're the ones that have done all these things, that they're the ones that did not live up to their vows, that they are the ones who lied and cheated and betrayed. The problem with that position is that it does keep you stuck. It puts everything into this binary of all good and all bad. And that's not life, even though it'd be easier if it was. And by no means am I saying that that means that you excuse them from taking responsibility for what they have done. No, that is completely on them. But what I am saying is holding that judgment of them, it's not your burden to bear. At some point, that desire to punish them, that need to blame them, is holding you back. In fact, it's probably harming you more than it's harming them. Don't do that to yourself. Their actions will have consequences, but that doesn't mean that you have to be the one to dole them all out. That being said, give yourself permission to go a little crazy. I know when I look back now at some of the things that I did rather impulsively those first few months, even first couple of years, I'm a little embarrassed because it's not how I would behave now. But you know what? At that point, it was the best that I could do. And so I have to forgive myself for how I acted in those moments because, well, I wasn't thinking rationally, and that's okay. Do the best that you can, but also forgive yourself for those times when you do mess up because you're going to, and that's okay. It's just all part of the process. Make sure that you prioritize sleep. Think about how hard it is to get through a day of work when you just have to make those relatively normal decisions if you've had a rough night of sleep. Now think about how hard it is to make some of the most important decisions of your life after weeks of disrupted sleep. Yeah, you won't be thinking straight. Sleep is critical right now. Your brain and your body both need that rest. Make sure that you make that a priority. If you need to seek medical help, do so. It's worth it. However long you think it's going to take you to recover from being cheated on, you probably need to double or even triple that timeline. I'm sorry to say it's going to take a lot longer than what you think. But the good news is there's progress along the way. Make sure that you document those changes, that you document that progress. Otherwise, it tends to just sort of slide by unnoticed. It's amazing when you look back and you recognize that even though you're not where you want to be, that you are light years ahead of where you were. And then finally, you may have to redefine what healing means. I know that after I was cheated on, I wanted to go back to the way things were. I wanted to be the Lisa that I was before this happened to me. And it's been 12 years now. I call myself healed, but I'm not the same person that I was before. This has happened. It has changed me. It has altered me forever. But that doesn't mean that it holds me back. It doesn't mean that I don't have a wonderful, fulfilling life. In fact, a better life than I did before. This isn't something that you're going to get over as though it never happened. Instead, this is something that you learn to live with. So think about what healing means for you. What do you want to be able to do? How do you want to live? How do you want to love? Let that be your driving force. I believe in you. I have faith that one day you will be able to look back at all of this and you'll say, I don't know how I got through that, but I did.